Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into the life and philosophy of Tom Blake. This guy, he wasn't just a, big name in surfing. He was also a deep thinker, blended science and spirituality in a way that honestly still feels relevant even now. Our guide for this is the surfer and the film star.
It's interesting. What I find fascinating about Tom Blake is that his wisdom, it came from experience, not from, being in school. He didn't have tons of degrees, but he really knew the ocean, and he had this constant curiosity about the universe.
Yeah, he was definitely more than just a surfer. First to surf Malibu, world record in open water swimming, inventor of the hollow surfboard, and the fin. I mean, it just goes on and on.
His inventions, they were remarkable, but it's more than that. It's how they came about, from this deep, deep understanding of physics. He was using science to improve, to enhance how we interacted with the ocean. It wasn't just intuition, it was about understanding, really understanding the forces at work.
Okay, so let's talk about atomic spirituality. This is where Blake gets really unique. He looked at Einstein's EMC2, and he saw something big, spiritual, even.
Atomic spirituality. It was revolutionary. He took this equation, groundbreaking equation, showed that energy and matter, they're interchangeable. And he saw it as proof, evidence of a divine force woven into the very fabric of the universe. For Blake, nature, it wasn't just beautiful. It was a manifestation of God. He believed God wasn't somewhere else, distant, but present in every atom, every wave, even every grain of sand.
And it wasn't just, some vague spiritual feeling. It was rooted in science. He even had this interesting take on miracles. He said, there's a scientific explanation for everything, even if we don't understand it yet.
Right. Imagine showing a jet plane to someone from 1,000 years ago. They'd think, magic, a miracle. But it's not. It's science. And Blake believed that. Many things we think are supernatural, they can be explained by science. We just have to dig deeper.
So he wasn't dismissing spirituality. He was trying to ground it in a way that made sense, a scientific understanding of the world. And this even influenced his view on religion. He admired Jesus' teachings, especially the ethical ones, the emphasis on compassion. But he didn't believe the supernatural parts of Christianity.
He was definitely unconventional for his time. And that unconventionality, it wasn't just his beliefs, it was his lifestyle too. He was a vegetarian back in 1924, way before it was, a common thing.
Wow. That's incredible. So he wasn't just talking, he was living it. What made him make that choice back then?
He said, I knew I didn't want to be killed, and I figured all animals felt the same way. Powerful. His vegetarianism, it wasn't just a diet. It was part of his golden rule ethic, deep respect for all life. But he also knew there's a balance. Compassion, it has to be balanced by the need to survive.
So he wasn't naive
Yeah.
about nature. He understood life involves tough choices.
Exactly. He wasn't saying be, blindly pacifist. He acknowledged the natural order, predator-prey relationships, the sometimes harsh realities of survival.
It's fascinating. We have this image of the surfer as this carefree, laid-back figure. But with Blake, there's this whole other layer, this philosophical depth. It really makes you think.
He was, you could say, the embodiment of the surfer's way of life. But he took it further. It wasn't just riding waves, it was living in harmony with nature, challenging societal norms and seeking deeper truths. It's like those classic surf movies, Gidget, Ride the Wild Surf. They capture this clash between the freedom of surfing and the expectations of society.
And Blake was living that clash.
Yeah.
Decades before those movies came out, he chose the ocean over a 9-to-5 job, which back then, pretty radical.
He criticized education, traditional education, saying the sea offered a more profound knowledge. He valued firsthand experience, learning from nature, more than the secondhand knowledge you get from textbooks.
He was a maverick, for sure. But that choice to reject those norms, it brings us to what the source calls the big kahuna's dilemma.
It's a question that still resonates today. How do we find meaning and purpose in a world where, according to Darwin, our main goal is just survival and reproduction?
It's a heavy thought, isn't it? If we're all just programmed to survive and pass on our genes, then what's the point of, art, music, philosophy, even surfing?
And this is where Blake's atomic spirituality comes back in. For him, there was meaning woven into existence itself. He didn't need external validation or a big story. He found purpose in understanding the universe, living in harmony with nature, and pursuing his passions.
He didn't shy away from the realities of life, the harsh parts of nature. He just chose to find meaning within that through science, through spirituality, through his connection to the ocean.
And that leads us to this idea the source calls it nonsense, the stuff we embrace to cope with this potentially meaningless existence. It's fascinating.
Nonsense being like religion, entertainment, even those like passionate hobbies we have, the things we really get into to avoid facing that existential void.
Right, exactly. Like a defense mechanism. We create these narratives, distractions, to protect ourselves from the possibility that maybe there isn't some grand purpose to it all. You know, in a way, you could argue Blake's dedication to understanding the ocean, the laws of physics. It was his way of dealing with this dilemma.
Makes you wonder, where's the line between escapism and genuine engagement? Is spending hours researching something any different from spending hours, riding waves? Are we really living or just distracting ourselves?
And it's a bigger question now, I think, with the internet. So much information, entertainment, all the time. Is scrolling through social media, is that any different from Blake just hanging out on the beach? It comes down to intention and how it fits with your values.
It's that modern-day kahuna's dilemma, and it's a question each listener has to answer for themselves. Speaking of big questions, the source brings up Errol Flynn. Seemed like an interesting kind of parallel.
It did, a bit out of nowhere. But when you look at Flynn's philosophy, what the source calls his octagonal philosophy, there are some connections to Blake. Flynn said famously, "I know that truth is sometimes an octagon, and that I am one. Contradiction is a cardinal element of life, and of itself may be no contradiction."
So he's saying embrace the contradictions, the messiness.
Yeah.
Don't try to, fit yourself into a perfect little box, which I think you see in Blake too.
Oh, absolutely. Both nonconformists, living life on their own terms. And they shared a love for the ocean, saw it as a source of freedom and challenge. Blake wasn't just a philosopher, though. This was a guy who really pushed himself physically, setting records, testing his limits.
He had this saying, lessen the overhead. Seems like it applied to more than just surfboard design. It was a whole philosophy, simplifying, cutting away the unnecessary stuff, to focus on what really mattered.
And for Blake, what mattered was that connection to the ocean. It was his teacher, inspiration, his, testing ground. Think about the time he lived in. Everyone else focused on, money, jobs, climbing the ladder. Blake shows a different path.
He was countercultural, for sure. He found fulfillment, meaning outside the normal, markers of success.
It's a good reminder. We have the power to define success for ourselves. Sometimes true fulfillment comes from following your passions, even if they don't fit the mold.
And Blake's passion led to some amazing things. We've talked about the surfboard, the fin, but he also invented the torpedo buoy and the rescue ring. He was saving lives with his inventions.
His creativity, it wasn't just theoretical. It had real impact. He saw a need and used his understanding of the ocean, of physics, to come up with solutions.
And it all comes back to that atomic spirituality, finding the divine in nature. And the atoms that make up everything around us, it's like ancient Greece, but mixed with modern science.
Yeah. Bridging that gap. Ancient wisdom and modern science, creating this unique worldview that still, makes you think today. So how do we connect this back to the listener, the person who might not be a world-famous surfer or inventor? What can we learn from Blake's life?
That's the question, isn't it? What does atomic spirituality mean? Or the big kahuna's dilemma for the average person dealing with everyday life?
One big takeaway, I think, wisdom, it can be found anywhere. It doesn't require, formal education, fancy titles. It's about curiosity, being observant, open to learning from the world around you.
And not being afraid to challenge how things are. Blake, he was an individual, went against the grain, and because of that, achieved amazing things, lived a remarkable life.
He shows us it's okay to make your own path, to define success for yourself.
And find something you're really passionate about, something that fuels your creativity, gives you a sense of purpose. For Blake, it was the ocean. For others, it can be something totally different. But find that thing, that ignites your soul, and go after it.
It's about the power of passion to drive us, to help us overcome obstacles, and to live a more fulfilling life.
We've covered a lot. Blake's philosophy, his inventions, his lifestyle, the dilemmas he faced. But I keep thinking about that big kahuna's dilemma, searching for meaning in a world that often feels indifferent.
A question that's been around for centuries, and now with all this information, it feels even more relevant.
Feels like we're all kind of, adrift in this huge digital ocean, constantly bombarded with information, distractions. Makes you think, are we that different from the beach bum stereotype, chasing the next wave of, entertainment instead of the next set of waves?
Easy to get swept up in the current, lose sight of what matters. But I think his approach, it's valuable. He found meaning, purpose, not from outside validation or material things, but from his connection to nature,
Mhm.
pursuing knowledge, living by his values.
He found his anchor in something bigger, something beyond those everyday, worries. And maybe that's the key for all of us, not finding one big answer to the meaning
Oh,
of
right.
life, but finding the things that click with us,
Yeah.
make us feel connected, give us that sense of purpose.
Could be through art, science, relationships, even just being in nature, finding your own ocean and diving in.
It's funny, those surf movies keep coming back to me. They captured something about this search for meaning, wanting to break free from expectations, find your own way. And Blake, he was living that long before those movies.
A true pioneer, not just in surfing, but in ideas too. And even though his life, it seems, extraordinary, I think there are lessons there for all of us. It's about having the courage to challenge the status quo, to find success on your own terms, and embrace the complexities of life, the contradictions.
And maybe that's what he meant with that line. There is no sentiment in nature, but there is plenty of necessity, accepting the world as it is, with the beauty, the harshness, the order, the chaos.
Realizing that there's a kind of freedom in letting go of our illusions, our need to force meaning onto everything. When we just, surrender to the flow of nature, the cycles of creation, destruction, we start to appreciate the world for what it is, a vast interconnected web of being.
And within that web, we find our place,
Mm.
our own purpose, our own way of leaving a mark. Might not be as big as Blake's legacy, but it'll be ours. And who knows, maybe it'll, ripple outwards, inspire others to find their own connection to something bigger.
So wrapping up our deep dive into the life and philosophy of Tom Blake, I think we're left with a challenge. How will you embrace the complexities of life? How will you find your ocean and dive in? How will you find meaning? In a world that often seems to offer none, these are questions worth thinking about. And I hope exploring Blake's journey has given you some inspiration, some guidance.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. Big thanks to expert speaker for sharing your insights, helping us understand the wisdom of Tom Blake. And to our listeners, if you're, eager to learn more, check out the sources. We've linked them in the show notes. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep searching for your own truth.